Hey beer geeks! I think you might just be able to see that I am up here at the amazing historic brewery of Elgood's in the east of England, witnessing a Coolship being filled. Now this is only the second I've ever seen. It's an incredible, unique and historic process of making beer, and in particularly modern times making sour beer. Now I'm up at Elgood's with the amazing Crossover Blendery, one of my local breweries and one of my favourite producers of spontaneous beer here in the UK, and we're going to be talking to them about how these incredible beers are made, why these incredible beers are made, and indeed exactly what is happening behind me right now. Crossover is the work of Charlie and George, two lambic lovers who set up a spontaneous blendery in North Hertfordshire during the pandemic. Charlie and George make spontaneously fermented beer. That's beer where no yeast is pitched. Instead, it's inoculated with wild yeast in the air and aged for years in barrel to turn tart, sour and complex. I made a short film about Crossover in 2021, and as my local brewery I've been following them closely since. It's been exciting to witness their journey and taste their releases as the base beer gained complexity through more and more time in barrel. To make the original work though, they have to turn to someone else as it requires a very particular piece of brewery equipment. At the crack of dawn I drove 2 hours north to Wisbech, an old market town on the River Nene, in time to catch the mash at Elgood's Brewing, a cask ale brewery founded way back in 1795, and one of the few historic UK breweries to still have that particular piece of brewing equipment, a functioning coolship. By that, I mean a giant swimming pool used to chill down boiling wort in the days before artificial cooling. We'll get to the story of Elgood's later, but first, I caught up with Charlie about how things have been going and what we were witnessing today. So Charlie, thanks for having me back. How have things been? I think it's almost 2 years since I came by, like pushing 20 months, I think.
That's first of all pretty crazy that it's been that long, but things are going well. We are expanding the amount of beer we're making these days, which is pretty cool.
Which for you guys is no mean feat. That means more oak barrels, not...
More oak barrels, more stuff on the Coolship.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I can't complain really. You know, sending beer all over Asia, which is pretty cool. Wow. About to start sending beer to America, and then we've sent a lot of beer to Europe as well. So,
considering when you started, you were driving up here in lockdown, trying to get this business going during a pandemic. It's remarkable that your reputation has stretched to Asia, your beer has stretched to Asia, and you've managed to make, you know, the beers that I've been drinking over the last nearly 2 years have been increasingly exceptional.
Thank you.
Really beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I think what we found with this type of beer is, you know, it takes a lot of time, and I think when we first started this project, we didn't realize how long it was going to take. You know, we started releasing our first beers after 9 months, and, you know, in hindsight, they were probably a little bit too early, but now we are blending across 1, 2, and 3-year-old beer stock. The complexity of the beers and the sort of maturation of the beers is been really cool to see, and we feel now, you know, incredibly proud of what we're putting out, and you know, now we're coming into our 4th brew season, which is just insane.
Yeah, so you're now of that age where, like, the Belgic producers would be producing what they could call a Gers. You're of that age, you can produce that complexity and get the nuances from all those different blends now.
Exactly. So we actually bottled our first Gers blend just after Christmas this year.
Right.
So we'll let that sit in the bottle for at least 8 months before releasing. And the beer we're actually going to try today, Mackerel Skies, is a blend of 1 and 2 year old beers, and then it's been now in the bottle for over a year.
Right.
And bottle conditioning is key to these types of beers in terms of flavour development.
Yeah, because there's still so much fermentation and conditioning to do. It's completely flat when it goes to the bottle, and now it should be effervescent and beautiful. Should we give it a go? I'm very excited. I think this is the first, I guess, well, it's not certainly not a clean beer, the first like non-fruited beer that I've had from you guys, where we're going to see the expression of the character that you get from brewing in this incredible space. How did you meet Elgood's, and what did they say when you said that you wanted to use these for their Belgian purpose, I guess?
So We were talking about a little bit about it earlier. You know, when we first came here and we spoke to the owners, they thought we were completely mad when we said we
I think
wanted
they
to
probably
take,
still think that.
which is kind of fair enough because no one in the UK has taken on a project just focusing on spontaneous fermentation of
It's
this
always
sort
been
of
a
size.
side project, which from talking to you and to George, it seems like it's not necessarily a good idea. You've got to focus on this. It's not something you just come back to once a year and brew and wait for what happens.
Exactly.
So I want to take a second and get the aroma on this, because I'm stood in the space. We talk a lot about how you should drink beer in the right location, and we're by the Coolships where the beer in about an hour is about to cascade out.
Correct.
And we're drinking a beer that came through this way, literally took this route. So if there's any place you should be drinking this beer, I'm not suggesting you come and break into Elgids, but
Yeah, no, it's nice. Actually, this is the first time we've drunk our beer next to the Coolship,
No way.
so that's a pretty unique experience. But yeah, a lot of the beers we've been doing have been fruit-based, and you know, we're always using British fruit. But the beers which inspired us, you know, inspired me and George, was lambic, specifically Cantillon, and we're now happy. You know, we are making beers which we think are on par now with the types of beers the guys are making in Belgium, and you know, for us, they're only going to get better.
I mean that aroma is taking me straight to the Bajota land. It's like it's glorious, like rich, sweet apple juice, but tempered with like a real farmyardy funk, like a dry hay kind of character. Like it's beautifully balanced. There's little hints of acetic, like little bits of vinegar, but there's also so much Brett on that. It's super Brett forward, and I really think that helps with drinkability. Well, we'll see, but I think that helps with drinkability rather than being quite acetic, which quite a few of the Belgian lambics have increasingly gone for, I think, as people look for sourness in their beer. We talked, when I last came, we talked about how you don't really class your beer as sour, like you're really interested in the Brett with the acidity balancing.
Exactly. So, you know, what we're doing is we want the sort of purest expression of the wild yeast, and that is why, you know, we are really happy to team up with Elgids. I mean, you'll see from the video how historic a brewery it is and how much culture there is in this brewery. You know, if you walk around, there's wild yeast and bacteria everywhere. There's some oak planks strapped above us here, which was basically a 250-year-old oak tree, fell down in the garden, and they planked them, and now they strapped them to the ceiling. And these are the exact type of environments that wild yeast likes to live in.
Tell me about, just quickly, the brewing process while we're here. So there's a very specific way that lambics are made. How close do you adhere to that when you brew here?
So what they're doing, if you're doing a turbid mash, you are trying to make a wort full of complex sugars and carbohydrates, and we are trying to mimic the sort of turbid mash process. So we're doing a high single infusion mash, and then we're doing a very hot sparge. This is in order to get those complex sugars and carbohydrates off the grains.
And you want that because then it will ferment. The normal yeasts that are also in the air won't be able to chomp through everything before the funky stuff has a go.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll have our sort of initial fermentation where you'll have a large gravity drop, but then there will still be enough sugar in the beer in order for Brettanomyces to come in later. You know, even 1 or 2 years down the line, you're seeing big gravity drops.
And so you're boiling for 4 hours as well, which I guess, you know, caramelizes and sugars makes them a bit harder to ferment, and that's where you're aging out hops to just essentially keep a lid on that acidity. And I mean, there is some bitter character to this, just a little.
So that's from the fuggles we're using. So now we're actually trying to use less fuggles, which had quite high alpha acids in them. Alpha acids leads to bitterness. Yeah. So now we're trying to find hops with lower alpha acids.
Even less bitterness than fuggle, people.
Yeah. Yeah. We're trying to basically bring on acidity a bit quicker, and we want less bitterness. We like bitterness in our in the mackerel skies and in our base beers, but for the fruit beers, we think a less bitter base beer will let the fruit character shine through more.
Particularly with fruits that are bringing tannins and stuff as well, so they can sort of clash. Yeah.
If you look at these Belgian producers, some of them have been going for over 100 years. You know, we're only 3 years in, so everything to do. It's like building your house character and reusing the barrels, and then also for me and George actually blending the beers. You know, every year when we're blending, we're starting to pick up on things from the previous year in order to make that beer a little bit better.
The characteristic I look at for in a Gers is sherbet, because I want that acidity, I want that funkiness, and I want that kind of spritzy Prosecco kind of vibe as well, and that's all in this glass. It's beautifully balanced, there's lovely soft acidity to it. It's absolutely stunning.
Thank you very much.
It really, really is. The character of this shows that you're making the right decisions in the blendery, you're choosing the right barrels, and you're choosing the right people to brew with as well.
Yeah.
I love almost a cyclical nature of, you know, these Coolships weren't used for this style of beer back then. The beer may well have had some Brett character to them, but you've come back and you're embracing what these things are so good at, whereas most breweries are tearing them out. So it's lovely to have new life in these Coolships and in these breweries as well. You know, cask breweries are going through a tough time, and you guys are here paying money to use this incredible kit, and I love that. And to make beer like this is just special.
Yeah. I mean, for us, it's the king of beers. That's why we're doing it. And yeah, to team up with Elgood's is very, very special. And as again, we'll see in this video, you know, when the wort hits the trays, the whole room steams up. Yeah, you can't really beat it.
There's going to be plenty of time to revel in Elgood's history too. It was time to get the hops in and bring the wort to the boil, where it would stay bubbling away in the brewery's diving bell-like copper for about 4 hours. In the meantime, I was planning to chat to Elgood's head brewer Alan Pateman, but it was agreed that we should go and have a pint first. Well, Alan, thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to see you, Johnny, and really nice to be able to do it for you. A brewery you've not been to?
No,
Can't be that many, can there?
well, there's not so. Well, yeah, we're getting there. It's also pretty rare to be in such a historic place as well. I didn't realise quite how old this brewery.
Yeah, this is one of the few Georgian breweries left in the country, very much unaltered. So built in 1795 as a brewery. And it went through several partnerships before a man called John Elgood in 1878 bought into the business, and then from then on it became Elgood's Brewery.
The second oldest remaining brewery in the UK?
There's one or two ahead of us, I think.
There'll be Shepherd Neame. I can't think of another, but maybe
if
there
it's
is.
A competition, I'm sure there's one or two that'll come out the woodwork. But the important thing is we're still here, we're still brewing beer. Wisbech as a settlement was quite important in its day as an inland port. We still are a port.
Right.
There's not a lot that comes into Wisbech now, but on the River Nene, or if you're from Northampton, you have to call it the River Nen for some reason. But in Cambridgeshire, in the Fens, it's the Nene. And as you've seen, the river is very much altered in its course. So over the years, the Fens have been reclaimed from the wild marshes and drained, and water engineering has sort of moved water around. A lot of us are very close under sea level.
Right,
I
okay.
think I'm...
So you're watching the icebergs with...
I'm about 3 yards under seawater at home, or under the sea level. So, yeah, very much...
So drink your Elgood's while you can, people.
While we're still here, give us another 80 years, I think I saw yesterday.
That's all we've got.
Yeah, something like that.
Well, the malt will stay dry. We're at the top-ish of the brewery.
Right, we're... because it's a Georgian brewery, it's not a true tower brewery. It's actually only 2 stories. Mm-hmm. But we're in the 1950s extension, so this is a modern part of the building.
I thought it was 1950s brick.
Nice and warm, nice and warm because it's over the boiler.
Right.
So the boiler was put in. The current boiler we have in 1949. It was coal-fired originally, and then converted to oil. So it's now running on oil, and the malt is stored above the boiler house to keep the malt nice and warm and dry, which actually helps when you mash in because
you haven't got such a temperature
the
adjustment.
differential is pretty easy. So working out our striking heats and the liquor temperature that we need in Fahrenheit, of course, is fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
We buy at the moment, we're one sole supplier for our malt, so we're buying all of our malt from Crisp Maltings, who are based over near Fakenham at Great Ryborough.
Yeah, not a great long way.
Using Marisotta. Everybody says they're using Marisotta. Yes, we are. We know where it comes from. because we're not very far away from where it's grown. So that North Norfolk coastal strip is one of the best areas for growing malting barley in the country. And it suits us as well because we can collect in small amounts from the maltings.
And that pint we had at lunch was gorgeously, caramelly and bready.
Nicely balanced between, we like to think that all of our products, I'm slightly old-fashioned and traditional as you've gathered, that we have a balance between malt and hop, so that neither one is struggling or shouting. So here we're storing pale ale malt, but we have a whole range of stuff now with our work with the, I still call them cooling trays, I'm afraid, not Coolships.
I think you're probably right. I think cooling trays,
and they still are, as far as I'm concerned. However, so we now have to stock or get in for this operation raw wheat, which is a bit of a challenge with a brewery that was designed, I suppose most of the kit we've got is from the mid-1800s to the early 50s.
Right.
So not exactly designed for doing what we're doing with it, but very versatile and actually works okay.
And uniquely good for the crossover beers that are being brewed today.
Because we haven't ripped out the cooling trays, and as you've seen, we'll come back to them in a moment, they are part of the heart of the centre of the brewery, so to take them out would be a real shame. We then had to rediscover, and personally I had to do something I thought I'd never do, i.e. brew sour beer, because we were looking at the American export market about 10 years ago, maybe longer ago than that, and we had somebody come round, an importer, said, oh, I can't do the Texas accent, but you could brew sour beers. No, I'm not doing it. So I used to be brewing sour beers here, and my heart fell and my face fell slightly after that as well. But it's been, it's proof that you're never too old to learn something, and you should look at different ways of doing things. And we've actually had major successes in competition with our sour beers, and I'm sure our friends at Crossover are going to have even more success with their venture, which seems to be going really well.
Yeah.
I could have stayed chatting to Alan for much, much longer. The changes he's seen in the industry, which includes the original pervasive use of cooling trays and decades later their rebirth as sour beer coolships, was fascinating to me. It's heartbreaking that historic breweries like Elgood's, that were once the driving force of the economy and vital parts of local communities all over the UK, are now so far out of favour, and in many cases going into disrepair and indeed closure. Elgood's has seen its fair share of decline too, and makes a lot less beer than it used to, despite that lunchtime bitter showing that the beer is as fresh, wholesome and delicious as ever. It's heartening though to see new life breathed into these breweries and machines by Crossover, and incredible to see these centuries old cooling trays being filled once again. The work cooling, we assembled 8 1,000 litre wooden boxes to transport the beer to the blendery, where it will sit in barrel for up to 3 years. Hopefully, we'll touch base with both Crossover and Elgood's again then.